1990s horror like I am, you're going to realize that this whole decade is kind of overlooked in my opinion, especially the early part of the 90s where horror kind of started to take a dip and people just weren't caring about it much anymore. Coming from strong decades like the 70s and 80s, the 90s just kind of felt like they were running out of ideas. Now, the first half of this decade, you do kind of bleed from the 80s into the 90s, then it gets real stale, and then you get into the later 90s where things like Scream kind of help pick it back up. Now, what I want to talk about today in my part 1 is 10 overlooked horror gems that I think you guys are going to really dig. Now, some of these can be looked at as they're so bad, they're good. I look at these as they're so bad, they're rad. And I'm going to have 10 movies in here that I actually really like that I think you guys are going to dig to. Alright, so a lot of these I chose are early 90s flicks. Again, this is part 1. This is only 10 movies. I could go and do many parts of this thing. If you guys like this type of content, let me know down below, and there'll be more of this 1990 horror that we can uncover. Alright, the first one is going to be a banger. This one on the list is one of the ones that most people may know, but I also think it is pretty overlooked. And to be quite honest, it might be my absolute favorite horror movie of the 90s, and that is 1994's Brain Scan. Now, Brain Scan is a great movie from the 90s, 1994. You have Edward Furlong, you have Frank Langella, and man, this is just a real cool movie. It kind of takes a lot of the slasher type genre and kind of brings the 90s into it with things like virtual reality and CD-ROM and video games, and it kind of really starts to bring the 90s into the slasher genre. Now, one thing I will say about Brain Scan is it is a real cool movie, and to be honest, the main villain, Trickster, is somebody that I could have seen kind of playing a big role in the 90s if this thing really took off. Now, Trickster to me could have been like that Freddy Krueger that we were looking for back in the day, and there was a lot of effects in this thing that they cut out of the movie, which in my opinion, I think that they kind of missed the boat with adding these really cool practical effects. You know, CGI was starting to rear its head, so they weren't sure if they wanted to go this route and kind of bring back more of that weird practical body horror effects of the 80s, but man, this Blu-ray from Scream Factory is the one to get. I mean, as of right now, this is probably the best way to watch this movie. And the special features, they show you some of the end scene practical effects that got cut during this movie. I don't want to get too much into this one, but basically you follow Edward Furlong's character around. He goes on the internet and he finds Trickster, and then all of a sudden these murders are starting to take place and we're trying to kind of figure out who's doing it, and that's when all hell kind of breaks loose. So again, this is one that I highly recommend, and that's why I brought it first on my list. Alright, the next one is one that I just recently saw for the first time. It totally passed me by throughout the 90s, and this is 1992 horror slash maybe a little bit of comedy. It's from Full Moon, so you know what you're getting, and that is called Seed People. Now, I did a full review when this Blu-ray came out from Full Moon. It's actually probably been within the last year. But when I watched this, I was actually pretty surprised that I enjoyed it so much. It is a little bit cheesy and campy, but that's what I love about horror movies, especially the ones I loved through the 80s. It really carries over into this early 90s with something like Seed People. It's kind of a little bit of a invasion of the body snatchers. These pods land in this little rural town from outer space, and all of a sudden, people start changing through town. If you like things like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, if you like things like Critters, I mean, you have these little monsters in this, and these effects are so bad they're good in this thing. It's just the style of effects I really like. But Seed People is a fun one, guys, and like I said, this Blu-ray just came out from Full Moon a couple months ago, so if you want to see this in kind of all its glory in this remastered edition, this is definitely the one to check out. Alright, number 3 is a sequel to an 80s kind of slasher movie, and this is Maniac Cop 2. This came out in 1990. Now, the reason I had this on my list is because if you didn't like Maniac Cop, you probably weren't going to watch Maniac Cop 2. But in my opinion, this one is way better than the first one. So if you didn't like Maniac Cop, I highly suggest to check this out. If you like Maniac Cop, you definitely want to check this out as well. Now, again, it takes the Maniac Cop premise, and it's about the cop who ends up becoming a serial killer, and it kind of amps it up a little bit. It kind of makes it a little bit more fun. I mean, it's got great music in here. It really doesn't take itself as serious as the first one. And this, in my opinion, exceeds expectations from the first one. So if you haven't seen Maniac Cop 2, this came out from Blue Underground. I do think there might be a 4K available as well, but Maniac Cop 2 is a real fun one, guys, and definitely add it to your list. And speaking of overlooked movies, this might be another one where most people have heard of it. Maybe not everybody has seen it, but this is a John Carpenter flick that I feel like completely gets overlooked and, in my opinion, is one of his best. I did a full John Carpenter ranking, and you're going to see where this one kind of falls in it, but it definitely doesn't get as much love as it deserves. That is 1995's In the Mouth of Madness. A real fun movie. Again, it's not one that people talk about all that often as one of his best, but I think it's right up there with some of the classics. So this is about Sutter Kane, who's like an author very similar to Stephen King. Now, Sam Neill is in this, and he's almost like an investigator, and he's trying to investigate this Sutter Kane character in these books, because a lot of the stuff from his books are coming true. Now, this is a creepy film. I mean, it's a fun film. It's to me, it's a kind of a heavy metal film. It's got a real cool score and soundtrack to it. This is one I definitely think is a little bit overlooked when you think of John Carpenter movies, and it did come out in 1995 when horror was not at its peak. So if you happen to miss In the Mouth of Madness, I highly recommend checking it out. And it's also kind of based on a H.P. Lovecraft kind of story, so definitely want to check out. This is a collector's edition from Scream Factory. A lot of features. I'm sure this is probably heading to 4K pretty soon, but that's In the Mouth of Madness. Now, speaking of Scream Factory, speaking of H.P. Lovecraft, another flick that they did, which is another Lovecraft story, is one called The Resurrected. Now, this is not one that is ever talked about. This is a 90s flick. It's got Chris Sarandon in here. And this one is about Chris Sarandon. He's a scientist, and basically he's coming up with ways to avoid death. And a woman is hired as a private investigator to kind of find out what he's up to in this little farmhouse in Rhode Island, which again is actually funny because that's where I'm from. So this one was always a little bit intriguing for me. So this is a real fun one, often overlooked. It's got some pretty cool effects in here as well. This is The Resurrected with Chris Sarandon, and this is the Scream Factory Blu-ray release. This is the first time I'd ever seen this movie when this was released on Blu-ray. So it is one that I overlooked in the 90s, but it's definitely one that I think you guys are going to dig. All right, this one is one of my all-time favorites. I actually think I have it on the shirt somewhere. I do. And that is 1990's Frankenhooker by Frank Henenlotter. This is such a great, fun movie. Basically, it's about this kid who's also kind of a scientist, and his girlfriend gets killed, and he's trying to put her back together, kind of playing Frankenstein, but not in the conventional way we're used to. Now, again, all hell breaks loose. This thing is wacky. This thing is wild. This thing is colorful. I mean, this is a fun movie. I remember finding this at the video store with my friend Scott when we were like teenagers walking to the video store, and we're like, what are we going to rent? We saw a movie on the shelf called Frankenhooker, and we were like, we've got to check this thing out. Man, we had such a ball with this movie. I think this is one you guys definitely need to track down if you have not seen Frankenhooker. Like I said, this is no masterpiece, but it is fun as hell. Patty Mullen does such a great job here. Great cast in this movie. Again, I'm a big Henenlotter fan, so if you like Frank Henenlotter's movies, things like Basket Case and stuff like that, I'm sure maybe you've come across Frankenhooker. But if you haven't, it's definitely one to check out. This is the Synapse Blu-ray. I'm highly positive this should be getting a 4K in the not-so-distant future, but man, it probably is streaming. But Frankenhooker is one you definitely want to check out, because when it comes to the 90s, to me, it's all about fun. Now, speaking of fun, you probably heard of Puppet Master, but in the 90s, Full Moon came out with their next edition on little puppets, and that is Demonic Toys, which I have talked about again on this channel before. I think Demonic Toys is a fantastic movie. I personally like this better than the first Puppet Master, and that could be a hot take or not, but there's something about this one that's really fun. The main villain, the little boy, super creepy, super scary. Some real cool characters here like Baby Oopsie Daisy and the Jack in the Box. I mean, really cool stuff. Fun as hell, gory, fun. It's what 90s movies are about. Like I said, the fun aspect of 90s movies, I really dig. Now, there's Demonic Toys from Full Moon Entertainment. That's the Blu-ray. I think they just announced they were coming out with a 4K, but keep your eyes open. You can find it on streaming, I'm sure, but that is Demonic Toys from 1992. All right, we got a couple more fun ones and then a pretty serious one to kind of cap this off. So the next one is going to be one of a trilogy, and this is another one that I'm sure is highly overlooked because as this trilogy went on, these really kind of got bad. And I actually think they're all really good, but to the majority, I think most of these just kind of came off bad, and they were like, I'm done with this franchise. But with the Christmas season coming up, it's definitely one you want to check out. And I'm going to recommend Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 5, The Toy Maker. Now, in my opinion, I think all the Silent Night, Deadly Nights are pretty fun in their own way. And if you want to know my ranking on this, I did do a ranking video talking about each one of these. but this is The Toy Maker, and I really, really like this one. It's basically about a guy who owns a toy store, and it's about a kid, and it's hard for me to really explain. This thing is absolutely bonkers. There's killer toys in this, a lot of 80s looking toys that are killing people, and there's something else going on in this toy store with this owner and his son that make it even creepier. Again, that is 1991's The Toy Maker, aka Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 5. Definitely add that to your holiday horror watch list. All right, this next one is, again, it's fun, it's wacky, it's wild. It's from 1990. It's an Italian slasher called Night Killer, aka Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. Wow, so Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 is how they wanted to promote this overseas when it first came out. But it's not anything part of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise. So let me take this slipcover off and let you see the cover of Night Killer. That's what it's known as here. And this is a real cool Blu-ray put out by Severin Films. It looks fantastic. The best this movie's ever looked. And it's a wacky slasher movie, guys. It's this crazy looking guy here stalking women, slashing women in Virginia Beach. And it is just wacky wild. The guy's got like a Freddy claw. It's just kind of a bonkers slasher movie that I think you guys should check out. And that is 1990's Italian slasher, Night Killer. All right, now this last one I'm going to talk about, we're going to get a little more serious here, because when this thing was released on TV in 1992, it was taken very serious. And when I did my video on top 10 made-for-TV horror movies, this one got brought up a lot by a lot of people saying, oh, I would have loved to have talked about this one. And again, I love this movie, but when it came to the top 10 I wanted to talk about at that time, it just didn't make the list. Now, if I did a part 2 to that list, we'll probably see this in here, but what a great time to talk about this, because this is a 90s movie, and it's one that is definitely overlooked. That is a movie called Ghost Watch. Now, this is a big, huge edition put out by 101 Films. Again, I'm not sure if this is still available, but this standard release might be. Again, this was a made-for-TV movie, Ghost Watch, and it was taken super serious when it came out. People thought this was real the same way they thought something like Blair Witch Project was real. They thought this was like a television show, almost like an Unsolved Mysteries type thing. And it was basically, it's about this family that lives in this house they're becoming possessed. Now, again, the way this was done and what makes this so special is that it was really portrayed to be a real type show that was almost on like a news station back in the early 90s. So, guys, if you have not seen this, this is a hella creepy movie. Ghost Watch. Again, I don't know if you can find this on streaming, but this is a pretty newer edition. It came out in the last couple years. Beautiful Blu-ray, Ghost Watch by 101 Films. I highly recommend checking this out. This is a freaky, creepy movie, and I think it's super overlooked for the 90s. Now, guys, I don't want to make this too crazy, too in-depth. I just wanted to give you 10 90s movies that I think are completely overlooked, just like the decade itself. These 10 right here are just absolute gems, in my opinion. As bad as they may be, as wonky as they may be, that's what makes them fun to me. And this is just part 1, guys, so if there's anything else that maybe you wished I would have talked about today, or at least gave a little props to, leave that in the comments down below, because this is part 1, and I'm sure you'll see them pop up in the future if this is a video that you guys really dig. So let me know that down below too. And before you guys leave, I'll play a little quick trailer about the 1990s documentary. I will have the link down below if you guys want to check that out and get your orders in if this is something you're interested in. Now, guys, thank you for checking this out. This is Garrett of Born2beRad, and like always, stay.
We're going to the movies!
The 90s, it was edgier, it was grungier, it was a little more self-aware.
It's so much better than what we thought we were making.
A time for total escape.
Broke into the wrong goddamn rec room!
The industry is changing, both on the big screen and on the small screen, in profound and sweeping ways.
It's a big ride.
It's scary, it's funny, it's twisted, and it's sexy.
Hot and squishy.
We were out of control and out of our minds.
All the legends are true. Every night we were blowing shit up. Just having so much fun.
Groovy.
We did it really fast.
It was very, very rushed.
It's certainly the only movie that I know of with death by corn cob.
What's the next appalling, disgusting, highly inventive way you can find to kill somebody?
All the A-list stars. They want to be able to see what it feels like to rip off somebody's head.
Oh my God!
What the?
Digital visual effects.
It opened up a whole new world.
When it doesn't work, oh boy.
It's just a bunch of hocus pocus.
Thank God for gateway horror.
Tim Curry, man, that was a casting coup.
I am the worst dream come true.
Candyman, Candyman, Candyman.
Be my victim.
Hell no. I'm not gonna look in the mirror and say Candyman 5 times. I'm not stupid.
It was an intense thing to do.
It gives me the heebie-jeebies.
You don't like it, huh? I said, we need the subspecies. That's the poster. Got to make the poster. We sent the footage back to the States, and Charlie was like, what the hell?
He wasn't nothing but a big old pussy anyway.
I called Jason a pussy, paid the price for it.
No one on planet Earth knew that Freddy's glove was going to come up at the end of that movie. They jumped to their feet.
I probably should have snagged one of those things when we were making that movie.
Want a date?
Want a date?
Want a date?
I kick ass for the Lord.
This one's for the fans.
The 90s was very self-reflexive.
So it pushes a lot of buttons.
Oh, we can't have eating babies on screen.
I could go to jail for doing a movie.
People were like, how dare you remake a classic? We were making a very weird movie. I tried to say my line through these giant teeth, and it...
To go to a video store.
In the 90s, obscure horror movies that I've never heard of. It was a glorious time to be a fan of films.
I like the crappy ones. Is it any good? No. Is it fun? Absolutely.
Is that kind of a movie? It's a horror film.
A moment of film history that shall never be forgotten.
As long as it's entertaining, I will watch the shit out of it.
Oh, that stuff is really, really rich.